So, I've been dealing with a lot of supernatural stuff lately. I'll wake up in sleep paralysis, and I feel my bed being depressed almost like a cat walking between your legs, and you can feel their steps. I've had episodes where my bed violently shakes. In fact, I've been thinking about this a lot, and in a lot of ghost shows, it's not uncommon for them to hear creaking of the floors coming from the attic upstairs. I think there are some things in the wild world that are literally invisible, yet they have gravity to them. These things I've been going through are interesting, like a good scary movie, but only afterwards when I contemplate them. When they are actually happening, it's terrifying. So what do you think? Do you guys have any experiences that could validate? Are there invisible things in this world that have weight to them? Invisible yet capable of creaking floors when walking on them, or depressing a bed mattress, if they decide to climb into bed with you. I don't know what I'm dealing with. Is it a poltergeist, a night hag, tokoshi, or what? I don't know what to name it, but it's here, and it has weight to it that is affected by gravity. We've lived in our current house for about 8 years now. In our last home, we were stalked by or always aware of something living with us. There are several stories there, but that's not what this is about. We built our new house through a housing program. Help build your house and live in it with a reduced price. Suffice to say, my mom and I, who are sensitive to spirits, were relieved after no longer feeling what was in the last home. A brand new home without previous inhabitants to soak up energy and emotion from us. Within a month of living there, I noticed a presence. Interestingly, it wasn't humanoid, which is what we're used to. I have a dark gray cat that follows people just to watch them, and a brown tabby at the same time. We first saw the spirit. The first night I encountered the spirit, I was brushing my teeth when I thought I saw my cat walk into the bathroom with me. It was a dark cat-sized thing, so I naturally assumed it was my gray cat. I turned and saw whatever it was zip into the hallway. I jumped out into the hallway to reaffirm what I saw, but whatever it was now gone. To describe that split second, there was a small creature that had been by the door, but when it left the bathroom, it sort of lost its shape. I thought it was a piece of cloth or laundry that had been knocked into the hallway, but obviously it wasn't there when I went and looked for it. Later, my mother mentioned seeing what seemed to be a ghost cat that changed shape and disappeared under her bed, or in her closet as a piece of cloth. One time, people would come over and ask why we didn't introduce them to our third cat, or fourth after we actually got our third. Sometimes when discussing ghosts and or cats, a guest would have a blank look overwrite their face, and they would ask if we had seen a black cat in the hallway, or if there was a black cat in the house. It was a little funny when you know they realized what they saw wasn't a physical form, or even really there. I've had friends stay over and mention a black cat, and one explicitly described as a cat shape climbing on my clothes in the closet. We later discussed it as a family, to find out my little sister had seen the spirit too. My father dismissed it, but that would be expected by at least one family member. We've all had several experiences with the spirit, and I've always had guests who mentioned it. Our other cats were never bothered by the spirit, and it never seemed to bother them either. My mother dubbed him Chintz, because he would always turn into a cloth shape when spotted and disappear. He's a cat if you don't directly look at him or acknowledge him, but quickly turns into a cloth or moldable shape once he realizes you've spotted him. We assumed he was a neighborhood cat that had passed away and found a new family, or new cats to hang around. Unfortunately, we soon stopped seeing him. I think he was still there. Sometimes I could catch a black small shadow moving in the corner of my eye, but couldn't catch if it was Chintz. I could still feel him sometimes, hopping onto the bed when there was no weight shift, and no cat when you looked. I guess sometimes he's just content that we know he's there, but doesn't have the energy to show himself physically. 8 years after the first encounter, the presence had receded a little. Well, we're moving in a few months. Last night is when I had my most recent encounter. He hopped onto my bed after I moved the cat tree into my room. My other cats weren't in there, and my light was on. It made me realize it had been literal years since I had last encountered our ghost pet, and none of us had really mentioned him. I think he knows we're leaving and doesn't quite want us to go. I've started feeling his presence physically and thinking about our other animals a little more. He's somewhat been considered part of the family, and sometimes we mention him if something unexplained has happened. So it's going to be a sad day to say goodbye in the end. I've heard of ghosts, demons, and spirits, and so on, being able to shift between human images and animal images. But I haven't been able to find one about an animal that could change into an inanimate object. Chintz is the image of a normal-sized black cat that changes into a small piece of fabric when he knows he's been spotted. His size doesn't change that I know of, and all eyewitness accounts always describe him the same way regardless of whether or not we've told them about a ghost cat. My name is Wade, and I was about 17 at the time of this incident. I had taken an evening trip to see my mom and little brother, and my girlfriend at the time had come along. We were going to call her Jen for privacy reasons. So Jen and I arrived at my mom's house around sunset. We visited her roughly 30 minutes before departing to go see a friend of mine. I wound up getting a small tattoo from my friend while we were there because she was training to be a tattoo artist and offered me a free one. By the time we had left, it was very dark. I remember the moon being fairly bright that night as the sky was cloudless. We were nearly halfway home, on an open stretch of 2-lane highway. There was only one building in sight, and it was about half a mile away when I noticed movement in the ditches on either side of the road. I turned my brights on and glanced at the inky blackness beyond their reach, still seeing movement but nothing. It wasn't anything immediately identifiable. So I continued. The closer we drew towards the warehouse-like building, the more tangible the moving forms became. They looked like distorted shadows of people, and they began to dart towards the center of the road. When the first few jumped in front of me, I slammed my brakes in an attempt to avoid hitting what I thought were people. Jen jumped, looked between me and the road asking what the hell was that about. I explained what I was seeing as I continued to slowly drive. The figures grew in number as we neared the building. I had become so frightened I was shaking. Jen claimed she saw absolutely nothing. As soon as I turned into the parking lot of the building, they were gone. I asked Jen to drive the rest of the way home, convinced I was just tired and having some sort of hallucination. When we arrived home, a man had wrecked his truck right next to our driveway. I found that interesting because I nearly wrecked as well. I never thought anything of it at the time, but it's been on my mind a lot lately. And I had just finished my exam, so I was at home. My back door has a window so you can see out the back to part of the neighbor's yard. My dog was looking out the back door window, and I sat down to cuddle her. So basically, at this point, I'm looking out the window into the neighbor's yard and petting my dog when all of a sudden I see a huge, long black figure get down from the neighbor's gazebo roof. It all happened in about 2 seconds. The creature took over a little of 1/3 of the roof. I would say the creature was around 10 to 12 feet long. I saw a head. It was shaped like a goat or cow. It was super long and skinny. It looked like it moved on all fours. The figure appeared to be a black shadowy thing, but I think it was shadowy because it moved so fast. Granted, there were people working on the neighbor's house roof, but they had all gone on lunch break, and I don't think anyone else was home. It couldn't have been a black tarp either, as it moved against the wind, and the movement looked too fluid to be a tarp flying in the wind. I wasn't the only one who noticed it either. My dog started growling, but oddly she didn't scratch at the door to go outside and see what it was. She just growled and backed away a little. I should mention that I'm located in southern Ontario in Canada, near Great Lakes, so maybe that may help. So 2 nights ago at 1:30 a.m., my boyfriend and I were in his car, parked in the driveway in front of the house, for some outside time for a while. From my passenger side view, I'm able to see through the window of the living room diagonally into the kitchen, where the small light above the sink was on. We start talking about video games, so that made us get ready to go headed back inside. Though, through the window I saw a dark shadow pass from the kitchen light into the dark living room. I asked my boyfriend if he saw anything, but he missed it. I'm always reading about supernatural things, so I kept moving my head back and forth to try to replicate the same shadow movement I saw to make sure I wasn't just jumping to conclusions, and came back with no results. It was pretty quick. If it were a person, it would be like I only saw them from their shoulder down by the time I noticed it go into the dark. About then, which was only probably like a minute later, the kitchen light goes out, and my boyfriend saw it too. It's probably my mom, he said. Yeah, but isn't it always on? That's weird, I said. Then the light turns back on, again like a minute later, and there's the same shadow. It was only seconds before it walked away again, but it stood still, and I made out a body and an arm. The whole dark figure had a feminine frame, and looked as if they were dragging their hand while looking out at the window. Now I'm spooked. My boyfriend was confused too, but insisted it was his mom, probably not being able to sleep. I get pretty spooked easily, but it was weird actually having real visual evidence. Anyway, we go back inside and I'm scanning the room for any evidence of anything and saw nothing. There was absolute silence. My boyfriend's parents were asleep. Anyway, I thought it was probably his mom. Until now. So we're all eating and I hear my boyfriend mention the story above because he started noticing that he'd go from our guest room to the kitchen to get snacks and drinks, and within 20 to 50 minute intervals, the light would be either on or off, with no sounds of his parents moving. Then, his mom straight up replied, "Oh yeah, there was a lady who died in that living room, you know. It's probably her." Then I learned that the lady who died was best friends with the neighbor across the street who was a writer. When the writer would get up at odd hours to do her typing, she would see from her window the shadow of her friend. She literally knocked on the door one night to let them know her friend's ghost is there. My fear has disappeared, and now I just feel like we are all together now. Okay, I'll get into backstory later, but to keep it short, about 5 years ago, I was swimming in a creek in the northwest of the US. On the way down, we saw a figure in the water, so we started leaving. When we got to the gravel road, we looked down to the hillside and saw a woman in a white dress. She was frail and weathered. She was standing at the end of the water under an old naked dying tree. She was making a sound that's very difficult to explain and harder to imagine. It was like a high-pitched woman screaming in a melodic way, like she was singing in pain. We heard something behind us and turned around, as we were all very spooked. Turned back around and she was gone. And the moment we turned around, we heard something crawling very fast up the hillside from the direction she was in. We started running. The screams got to an ear-piercing state, as we were sprinting for what felt like for our lives. It had gotten so loud that I couldn't hear my feet hitting the gravel anymore, my breath, or my friends. And I was too terrified to turn around to see if they were behind me. Luckily, we all jumped in the truck at nearly the same time, and as soon as the doors closed, it stopped. I've seen it twice since then, and heard the sound once again. Ran every time at the first sight. Haven't been back to the place since. My girlfriend at the time and her best friend heard the same sound outside their window the same night. She explained it to me in almost the same words I would have used the next day. No one had told them about it. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Perhaps click the bell for notifications, and remember, hell is empty, and the devils are here.